So today we are welcoming Brian Noyes. He baked pies and breads on weekends in... following the Q&A, we'll have a signing up here at this table. So if you have not already purchased the book, we have many copies behind our registers at the front of the store. We will ask you to line up starting here at the pillar. We will come by to ask your name for your personalization, so please have your books ready for us. Once the event is complete, we ask that you fold up your chairs, lean them against something sturdy to help us out a bit. And after the event concludes, there will be cake and pie. Tonight, we are very excited to welcome Brian Noyes, author of the Red Truck Bakery Farmhouse Cookbook, and Joe Yonan, author of Cool Beans. Brian Noyes baked pies and breads on the weekends in his Virginia Piedmont farmhouse while working as art director for the Washington Post and Smithsonian Magazine. He sold his goods out of an old red truck he bought from designer Tommy Hilfiger. After a New York Times story sent a flurry of business his way, he launched the Red Truck Bakery in Warrenton, Virginia in 2009. 6 years later, he opened a second location in Marshall, Virginia. The bakery now has over 50 employees and ships thousands of cakes and pies nationwide each year at redtruckbakery.com. Mr. Noyes will be joined in conversation with Joe Yonan, the James Beard Award-winning food and dining editor of the Washington Post. He is the author of the acclaimed cookbooks Cool Beans and Eat Your Vegetables. Now, please join me in welcoming to Politics and Prose, Brian Noyes and Joe Yonan.
I forgot about this.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Just noticing all my long time ago fellow staffers.
I think you have to press that thing up. That. I'll try it.
Can you hear
There you
me?
go. Yeah.
Sorry about the teas for pies. We brought cakes and brownies and our new castaway cookies, but I'll tell you all about those later. Come back on Pie Day for pie.
Right, the pie's on your shirt. All right, I just feel like we should start with the shirt. Because the shirt's very colorful, the shirt is amazing, and there's kind of an incredible story behind the shirt. So tell us about the shirt.
The deciding factor in wearing it tonight was I know Joe's from Texas, and this happened to be in my closet and fit right into the evening. But, and you'll hear about all this later, but when we opened the bakery, when I opened the bakery and cashed in my savings, it was right at the, just months before the Great Recession hit, and might not have been the best idea in the world, but the Obama administration was coming in, and I figured if anybody could right the economy, it was him. So we kind of stuck with it. It was a little scary. And then when we opened up our second store 7 or 8 years later, we went from 3 employees to 50 or so, 2 locations, and we shipped thousands of items nationwide every year. And it was our first year of having 2 stores at Christmas. And it just wiped us all out. So in January, we all just sat back and thought, what just happened? So I wrote a little letter to the President of the United States and said, we stuck with you. Thank you for helping us out. And here's where we were, and here's where we are now. Thank you very much. And so he did a very nice salute to us on Pi Day 3.14. We heard it was coming. They told us to beef up our websites. And at 2 o'clock, I sent a note to my contact and said, is this thing happening today? He said, let me check. And he wrote back and said, yes, it's happening at 3:14 p.m. We should have known. And so these women in Austin, Texas, they have a company called Fort Lonesome. They do hand chain stitching. And they did this whole salute to Obama and his love for our pies and his picture of him enjoying our pie. And so I put it on Instagram, and I got an email immediately that said, we're not even going to be nice about this request. We really want this shirt for the Obama Presidential Library and Museum. And so I said yes, so that meant I have to say goodbye to it. So I saved it for this event. I know Obama's a friend of the Politics and Prose, as he is a friend of the bakery. When we were here for Pie Day, one of the Politics and Prose staffers referred to the place that day as Politics and Pies for all the pies we had laid out. So I thought this was the perfect place to wear this the very last time with a guy from Texas moderating.
It's really incredible. Yeah, it's really incredible. Not bad advertising to have the shirt be at the Presidential Library.
So we hope to see that in many years, I guess.
Yeah. So
It's underway.
It's underway. Yeah. So, Brian, talk about your inspiration for the new book and what made you dive back in.
There were several factors. One, little things in the back of my head that haunted me from customers who complained because something wasn't in the first book. And most of them were things I totally forgot about. Like our beet loaf sandwich, which is not vegetarian meatloaf, but it's a good beef and goat cheese patty. And it never even occurred to me to put it in the first book. So that was a little list. People wanted some other cakes and pies. And so the pandemic came, Governor Northam, we live in Virginia, shut down the state. Dwight and I thought, well, maybe let's just get out of town. And we have this little farmhouse out near the bakery. And that was kind of a good, quiet place to go. And I had recipe files and cookbooks. And I thought I was just going to be sitting around coming up with new things to make for the bakery. And then on Instagram, a woman who owns a home design store outside of Seattle. I always think of us as a Southern bakery and a Southern cookbook, the first one. And it just surprised me to see pictures of our books on display in Boston or Omaha or Seattle. And she posted a video of a woman and her grown daughter who were suddenly together through the pandemic and baked their way all the way through from front page to back page.
Amazing.
And had posted pictures. So this woman who owns the store, who had sold him the book, filmed a little interview with him, and that's the first I heard about it. It was on Instagram. And then I started seeing pictures of dads and daughters making our cranberry muffins or families making coffee cakes from the cookbook. And I just thought, maybe we need to do a family comfort kind of cookbook. And, I looked around, I was in our farmhouse, and I just thought, well, let's just base it on out here. I mean, there's farmers out there who are still growing crops, but nobody was showing up to the farmer's market to buy them. And so it's kind of a salute to our little town in Virginia, in Fauquier County, where I started selling baked goods out of the back of the truck, and to the town that really supported us and got us rolling, and also to the farmers around there. So it kind of just turned into a little farmhouse cookbook, which is getting a lot of traction right now.
Yeah. So, first of all, it doesn't surprise me that there would be people in bookstores all over the country that would care. So everybody loves Southern food all over the country. So, what other recipes besides that beet loaf? What, just so for people here that weren't in the first book that were sort of command performances for the second book?
One was command with a fist behind it. It was this kind of a nasty note, but it was a woman who said, I bought, this was several years ago, so it was about the first cookbook, but she said, I bought your cookbook looking for the only item that wasn't in there, your sour cream coffee cake. What a waste of money. Please advise. And
please advise.
That was it.
Thoughts?
So that was on the list too. So that made it in the second book. And my little prelude to that is, I told that story. Then I said, Well, my advice is to make this for your family, and they'll love you forever. It was my mom's recipe, so I know that. And also, check the table of contents before you buy a cookbook. So yesterday, I thought, I need to send that woman this cookbook. So I sent her an email today, and I'm waiting for her address. So
Man, that's so nice. That's so great. So you wrote this during the pandemic when, so many of us were suffering in various ways. But I think it's fair to say, Brian, I hope it's okay that I'm chuckling because it was really terrible, but you suffered in kind of many ways during the pandemic. You just had one thing after another.
well, let's just say it wasn't the year to be in a hospital, and I had never been in one before. But I submitted my proposal for this new book. I came up with that idea about the family comfort thing, and I sent a note off to my agent, and she sent it off to the incoming editor-in-chief at Clarkson Potter Penguin Random House, who published the first book, and they kind of fast-tracked it. And so immediately I had to get to work, but I just had a full reverse shoulder replacement, so I was kind of typing with my left hand in one of those big ugly sling things with a box under it too, I think. And then I don't even know why or how this happened, but then I had to go in for a knee replacement, and so I'm kind of recovering during this weird, wacky time. And on one of the last days, one of the first days that I could walk around without Dwight or a walker or a cane or crutches, I was just walking our neighborhood in Arlington around Cherrydale, and walked across what was then called Lee Highway with my light in the crosswalk. Everybody was stopped except for a speeding cyclist who just mowed me down, and the first thing to hit Lee Highway was the back of my head. So I just went through this pretty awful concussion. And so if you're having books signed tonight, please put your name on a Post-it note, because even if I've worked with you for years and years, I just kind of blank out sometimes.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a challenge.
Yeah. So and you're needing to test recipes, and you're needing to write, and you're needing to edit, and
well, once an art director, always an art director, and I think Clarkson Potter knew they had their hands full when they had an author who used to be an art director, so
Right.
he wanted his book to look his way, I'm sure. And I have so many fellow workers from as all these some of these people were walking in, I just looked, it's like my resume has come to life, and editors from the 80s and 90s, and my editor from the Washington Post is here, and my photo editor, and from Smithsonian Magazine, and a friend from Tampa Magazine from 1980, and they all know what it's like to work with an art director. So we were going to shoot this book at the Farmhouse, and I was almost done painting the whole thing. We kind of put in a new kitchen and pantry, and that was all done. But the crosswalk thing came just as I was getting ready to paint the baseboards. I mean, it was all done except for that. So I can't even remember if I finished painting the baseboards. But my editor had to come down from New York, and she kind of sat with me and did edits and served as the art director during the photo shoot. And we had a great photographer who was the stylist on the first cookbook. So, I mean, she knew what I wanted. And I just maxed out a couple times and just had to sit on the sofa and just close my eyes and let the hustle go on around me.
And didn't you then, wasn't there a hip?
Oh yeah.
Then too?
I
You
left
almost
out.
forgot.
Yeah, I had a hip replacement. That came a little later, and then 2 weeks later it failed, and this was all out at the Farmhouse, and it was a midnight ride to the hospital in an ambulance, and within 15 minutes they climbed on top of me, knocked me out, and shoved it back in place.
Oh man, amazing. And so, okay, to me, one of the most incredible parts of this story as an author as an author who's going to be a month or two late on his next book, who didn't have any of those things happen to him, you made your deadline?
No.
Oh. Oh, thank God.
I finished 2 months early.
Oh, my God.
I did. I really did. Drop it. No, and it's my editor was with me yesterday at an event in Georgetown, and she talked a little bit about that too. But it was. I mean, I did that before most of this other stuff happened. So I mean, everything kind of worked out on a timeline that was just perfect.
It's amazing. Well, congratulations.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, and you're feeling. You seem like
Yeah,
you're feeling okay.
I'm maybe slightly wobbly walking and.
Yeah.
Remembering, but I say that out loud and everybody just says, we're all getting old.
Yep.
But one thing I should probably mention, only because I sometimes forget, but the inspiration also from this came from me being a fifth generation California guy.
Yeah.
We're from the Monterey Peninsula, and I just kind of thought everybody ate abalone sandwiches on Fisherman's Wharf every day, and I would fly to my grandmother's house in North Carolina, and as a kid for summer visits, and she would pick me up and drive me to a Meat and Three diner on the way to her house, and I looked at the menu and I didn't know what collards were, and I didn't know what Brunswick stew was, and I didn't know, I mean, even cornbread and okra, and I handed her the menu back, and I said, you need to order for me, and it was really great stuff, but it seemed like a foreign cuisine. So that afternoon, she said, go get that buttermilk, we're going to make some biscuits. And she started teaching me Southern cooking, and She was a one-room schoolhouse teacher, so she kind of knew how to do this, and probably knew she had a big challenge ahead. And but it taught me a whole nother cuisine, and I ended up moving out here years later, but married a guy from North Carolina, and I learned all about Southern food and how to cook his Aunt Edna's collards, and it's a whole different world for me.
How do you think that your California upbringing, I mean, you've obviously been steeped in Southern food for, 40 years now.
Right, yeah.
So, and you built your business around it, but there are touches of California that kind of come into your cooking still too, right? And what you serve at the cafe and some in the cookbook?
Yeah, there's some of that. I don't know how much, and I also don't know how like deeply Southern we are. I mean, there's a lot of my mom's recipes, a lot of my grandmothers on both sides. In the first book, there's persimmon cookies, which came right from my maternal grandmother who lived in Monterey. And I don't know if I can separate East Coast versus West Coast or Southern from what I'm doing. It's just my rule from day one was I have to like what we're making at the bakery, and people come in and want items to add to our repertoire, but if it's not something I really like to eat or like to make, then it kind of goes over in the other pile.
Well, I don't know how many people here have tasted items from the bakery. Let me just ask. So
good work.
Yeah, excellent work. So it seems to me like your style seems to be, fairly straightforward and classic in some ways, but you always have some twists. But you also, one of the things that I appreciate when I taste your food and when I look at your recipes is you're really good at concentrating flavors, and you seem to have a lot of recipes where you double up on, or triple up or quadruple up on various elements of a flavor to kind of really get it in there. Like there's peaches in the glaze and the filling in the peach ham pies. There's like orange, I think, in the filling and the dough and the icing.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Orange pecan rolls.
Yeah, there was a period in my life that orange zest went in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, even pork or something, which actually is great. But like our Lexington bourbon cake, which is in the new book, and you'll be sampling tonight, has fresh ginger.
Right.
It's got ginger root, main ginger root soda. It's got crystallized ginger. But it's all like secondary to the bourbon. But I like bourbon and ginger, and who wouldn't want to have that in cake form? Unless it could be made in pie form. But I like, I mean, that's a good point, that I really do like boosting flavors with lots of concentration.
Yeah, no, it seems to really work. And you also seem to get inspiration from so many places. I mean, just right then, well, I was just going to ask you about, like, with that bourbon cake, that was a cocktail that inspired it. And then, of course, some are coming from your family, restaurants you visit, chefs you know and stuff. But even just then, when you were talking about the bourbon cake, you seemed to consider for a minute whether you could turn that into a Lexington bourbon pie. Are you always doing that?
The gears are always cranking, I think. But one part I left out, when I was working at the Washington Post or Smithsonian Magazine, I would sneak away and go take cooking courses. I went through l'Académie des Cuisines, which we sorely miss when they closed down a couple of Thanksgivings ago. I went through the other CIA in Hyde Park, New York. You have to say that I discovered.
Depending on the crowd, yeah.
Yeah. The CIA. And then I did, and you were the beneficiary. At the Washington Post, we had staff meetings every Tuesday, I think, and everybody was assigned a day to bring in food, and normally it was Bethesda bagels. And I think they kind of waited for Brian Day, and it was more like raspberry frangipane tarts and maybe some bourbon cake. Booze is kind of a thing.
It's a running theme, yeah.
When we first opened the Warrenton store, I thought, we got to do something with moonshine, and being a Virginia bakery. So that was our first boozy cake. And then Dwight's 90-something-year-old Presbyterian choir director always made sure that her rum cake was waiting for him at his parents' house when he came home at Christmas or any time. And she would have Dwight's dad drive her to the ABC store where she hunkered down in the car while he went in and bought the rum, because no self-respecting Presbyterian choir director can get God inside. So then came bourbon cake and our amaretto cake and an apple jack brandy cake. And I think it was Garden and Gun magazine that referred to us as the bakery with a drinking problem, which we countered immediately with, it's the bakery that likes to party.
Right. It's not a problem. It's the good
So
thing.
one good aside about the rum cake, when we just had the Warrenton store, a woman showed up, came in, said she's going to church meeting, bought the rum cake, wanted us to slice it all up in serving size, and she took off with it. Drove around the block, came sliding back into our parking lot, ran into the store and said, "Oh my God, does your bourbon cake have bourbon in it? I'm going to an AA meeting." And so
Really?
we gave her a coffee cake, but she wouldn't give up her rum cake.
So I also love that you have shown such interest and facility with historical recipes. And I'm curious if you would talk about the Martha Washington's Great Cake, 'cause that seems pretty amazing.
We have this nice relationship with Mount Vernon. For some reason, they zeroed in on the first cookbook and had me in several times. And their bookstore, I mean, I showed up there and they must have had 6 or 8 cases of cookbooks to sign just for their show. So I've stayed in touch with them. They follow the progress on the new book. But just as I was thinking of what's going in the second book, I got an email from Maureen Cleveland, who runs the bookstore there, and says, you need to check out this Martha Washington cake. And I looked at it. I mean, it's her great cake that she would serve, but of course her enslaved servants were the ones making it. And somebody in the family wrote it down. She didn't, but I think her niece did. And so I had to go through Tudor Place to figure out the provenance on that. And we have the recipe. It's out there in the world. It's in a very good book about Mount Vernon historic cooking. But I like the idea of that being in there. It sounds like it's Martha Washington's great cake, and it sounds like a great cake, but I kind of got into it and realized, well, it's kind of a good fruit cake. I mean, there's a lot of fruit
Right.
in it, and it's spices. And but then she also told me about this punch that George Washington would make that would last for months and months while he's traveling on horseback, and it's called Cherry Bounce.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she's thinking like I'm thinking, and pointed her finger at me and said, you need to make that into a cake. And so we did, and we had it come out this last Washington's birthday. So I may be making some of those for them when we go down there and do a book signing. But there's good historic recipes in there. One of my favorites is something I wanted in the book. I could not find the recipe. It's the birthday cake that I grew up with.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's called the Noyes birthday cake, and it's really called out. It goes back at least to the
I've never seen anything like that cake in my life.
It goes back at least to the 1850s at the old family farm in Nebraska, where my dad grew up, where his dad was born, and my mom in California hated making this cake. So I just realized something. We have 5 kids in our family. 4 of us are born on the same day. It's 2 sets of twins born on the same day. So that meant Mom only had to make that cake once or twice a year. It just clicked. And I know it's family heritage, and I thought, especially with a salute to both my grandparents, that this cake's got to be in here. And I finished writing this thing. I couldn't find it. I sent notes to some relatives. They told me what they thought was in it, but that doesn't quite work. And swear to God, I was carrying cookbooks from Arlington to the farmhouse and just stacking them up there. And out of one of those spiral-bound church things, it was called Kitchen Secrets. The cover had already come off its spiral binding. It fell on the floor, the cover slid, and the first thing to slide out on the floor was my grandmother's handwriting and this cake called the Noyes birthday cake. And so I sent a note to my editor saying, I just found this thing. I got to get it in the book. Is that okay? And she said, hurry. And so I made it in. It almost was a cover. It's a pretty
It's a
stellar
striking cake. Do you want to describe it for people?
It's kind of boring. It's just white cake, white kind of fluffy chiffon-ish frosting as they would make back in the 1850s or something. And then they would just pour melted, unsweetened or bittersweet chocolate over the top and just let it pool and then just drain down the sides. And it's kind of Boston cream pie-ish, sort of, but it
looks incredible.
It's really good. And my grandmother's notes were about how the frosting's like candy and it tastes even better a couple of days later.
Amazing.
So it had to make it in.
Yeah.
And you got it right there.
Yeah. So you're connected now to so many of some of the biggest names in the food world. Like your editor at Clarkson Potter is Francis Lamb, who's the host of the Splendid Table, lauded food writer. Ronnie Lundy's one of the foremost experts on Southern and Appalachian food in the country. She wrote this beautiful foreword for you. You bought your truck from Tommy Hilfiger. You're friends with designer Billy Reed. Barack Obama blurbed your first book. And I was thinking to myself,
Wait.
what is Brian's secret? What is his secret? And I know what your secret is.
I don't.
Your secret is that you feed people. You send them cakes and pies and granola, and they take one taste, and they feel like they know you, and they love it, and they want more. So,
Well,
is
Ron,
that it?
that could be it. I'm a generous guy, and I'm not shy about just sending things off, and I think there's a lot of beneficiaries here of that. And Ronnie Lundy, who you mentioned, she wrote Vittles, which is a James Beard
Incredible book.
award-winning,
Yeah.
twice James Beard award-winning book, and it's all about Appalachian cooking. And she's just a fireball. She used to be the music critic at the Louisville,
Yep.
Kentucky paper, and now she just is so embedded in Appalachian food. And we met her at I first met her at a Southern Biscuit something festival.
Oh, I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have to judge it?
The International Biscuit Festival.
Well, as I said in the book, I don't remember anything about those biscuits, but I can't forget Ronnie Lundy. And so, I did the same thing with her. And finally, I got an email back from her that she said, if you send me one more cake, I'm going to have to get new shocks for my Chevy Astro van. So I took the hint. Now, she gets granola. But her intro's magical, and it's about her getting to know Dwight and I, and about making the drive up to visit both locations of the bakery on our way to Massachusetts to visit, of all people, my and your former agent, Lisa Eckes,
yeah.
who's one of the best food agents
Yep.
in the country. And I didn't know she was going up there, and I didn't know her, but Ronnie turned me on to Lisa, and Lisa submitted the proposal to Francis Lamb.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing.
But nobody turns down free cake. I think if I
Right.
was making sneakers or something, it'd be a different story. But,
Right. You'd have to know their size,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah,
Yeah,
all that.
yeah. Leather? No.
Well, before we take some audience questions, which I want us to leave some time for, I wanted to also give you an opportunity to talk about any of the other recipes in the book that you feel like you want to mention. I always like it when you get a chance to make people hungry.
Well, the difference between this book and the last is that there's more savory. It's not just pies, cakes, and dinner rolls and bread, but it's farmers market food. And there's a great, I just made this the other night and posted on Instagram, just like, these people that
Like you
follow
do.
us. Yeah. And like we do. And it's shrimp and okra and tomatoes, and I got everything at the farmers market on Sunday out near there, except the shrimp came frozen from Safeway, and the bacon came from our
Benton.
Benton's Bacon,
Yeah.
more good friends. And it's I don't know if you know about Benton's Ham and Bacon. They're in Tennessee, and I think it's the choice of at least Southern chefs. So I had a stack of that in the freezer. There's roasted carrots. Did that jump out at you?
Yes, it did. It looks beautiful.
Joe's vegetarian, and I thought about that coming over here. But there's a lot of good recipes in there with good produce,
The tomato
bones to
pie,
it. Yeah,
That late July tomato pie
Yeah.
is a stunner.
yeah, and everybody. That's kind of the thing everybody pointed out when they were talking about this in the lead up to the publication.
Yeah.
Mid-July tomato pie. There's crab cakes with a Mexican corn. Hi. Save those for you.
Thank you, Brian.
And I don't know what else. I mean, there's some good breads in there. There's some flatbreads and focaccia. A great kind of pizza bread we call focaccia, but it's actually based on a potato pizza with rosemary that we had in Florence. That a friend of us said, we'd never been to Italy, and she said, you got to go here and you got to get that. And so I thanked her in the book for it, and we make it at the bakery, and it's in the cookbook.
I think it just proves that, the thing that ties all of the dishes together, and even if they're from California or Italy or the South, the things that you serve at the bakery. It's obviously you and your palate. So, yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I love doing it. We've got a great crew. We're in comfortable surroundings. I used to work at the National Trust for Historic Preservation as the art director of Preservation Magazine in between some of these other magazines. And, I knew I didn't want to open up a bakery out there next to a nail salon and a strip center on the bypass. And,
Right.
our first location is a 1921 Esso service station that we renovated. And then the second location, we still have that one. The second location, which is our main location, is a former 1922 Marshall Pharmacy with a Masonic Lodge upstairs, and a little secret tavern next door that was a separate building, but it's now conjoined. And we signed the lease on that place. And then I got really nervous because nearly every building on Main Street in Marshall was boarded up. The bank next door had just closed. And the day I signed the lease, the family-run grocery store of 50 years closed up. And so, we're just a mile off 66, but when 66 opened, I think that took traffic off of our main street. And but, little bakery kind of created a food renaissance in our town. And now all those buildings have businesses. Most of them were food businesses. We opened first, and then across the road and down, it was a little the former post office before the new one was built in 1950. And that little building had been vacant for as long as I remember. And so it kind of turned into this hipster butcher shop, the whole ox. And then friends of ours who ran the Ashby Inn in Paris, Virginia, came and bought this kind of manor house across the road from us. And we're going to turn it into a farm-to-table restaurant.
Is that Field and Main?
Yeah. They were kicking around names, and I said, look, you got a butcher, you got a baker, you got to name it the Candlestick Maker. They said, no, we're going to name it Field and Main. And so the three of us, we're all friendly, and we were humming along with three good, solid food businesses. And then the bank next door to us, the building was sold, and a woman came down from Upperville who saw what was going on 1 mile off of 66 when she's, 30 miles or 20 miles north, and opened up right next door to us in the bank a butcher, a bakery, a kind of farm-to-table cafe, and an organic market. And so we were just freaked out, and we thought, well, that lasted a year. And it turned out her opening weekend was the busiest day for all of us, and I firmly believe in rising tide and lifts all boats. And she lasted a year, and we're still around.
Wow.
7 years and 6 years for the other guys.
That's
And
great.
it's still empty now next door.
Wow.
That's the only
wow.
place. And what's cool is in the parking lot of where that family-run grocery store was, just 2 doors down from us, this guy shows up with a red double-decker bus and parks it there and puts a grill on the first floor and dining on the second floor with outdoor seating and a bandstand in the park in the grassy area right there. So it turns into this one more wacky food thing on Main Street in Marshall, and that's what fed everybody during the pandemic. Because nobody had to go inside and they could sit outside, and everybody's just still humming along.
Yeah, that's fantastic. How about some questions?
I just thought of one
Yeah.
thing I wanted to mention at the top, and I totally forgot. Joe and I did not work together at the Post. I think you
Barely
came on.
missed
I
each
worked with
other.
Phyllis Richmond and
Yeah.
Tom Seatsma, who was her junior little copy boy.
Right.
and those were my days at the Post. Yeah. And then Joe came, and we got to be good friends. And I was so happy that he said yes to doing this exact event for the first cookbook right here
Yep.
in these exact seats, probably.
Yep.
And it means a lot that you came back and he's on paternity leave from the Post right now, but here he is coming in to do this event. And there's one person that I can't not mention who was a good friend and did the same kind of event for us at Union Market at Politics and Prose there. And that's Wendy Rieger from NBC4, and we were going to do an event once the book came out, and I think about her quite a bit.
Yeah, that was
But-
it's very sad. I told Brian before we came on that I think I would have been upset if somebody else had done this interview with him.
You were always going to do this one.
This one, yeah.
That one was a little more rollicking because,
Because of Wendy, yeah.
well, it was, I think it was bourbon cake propelled, and she.
Was it the signing? Was it the book event with the drinking problem?
It was the book event and the panel with the drinking problem, I think. But yeah, that was a really fun one.
Yeah, I bet.
No, this one always had your name on it.
Good. Well, okay, before we take questions, of course, now I'm thinking about another question that I have, which is, so, you know how, at least in part, this book was inspired by all the people who said, I looked, and like that one rude woman, and my favorite blank, you know, the recipe wasn't in there, and you put a bunch of those in the second book. Have you heard that yet?
Of
Something like that about the second book yet? Are there people who are saying that there are still things that they haven't seen yet?
No, I
They
just
want-
hear from people who are excited about the book. Today I was carrying to the car with a bum shoulder and a bum knee and a bum head, 4 bags of cakes myself, and just thinking, can I make it all the way to the car with these? And this woman comes out of her car and stops me and just wants to and starts saying, I want to tell you how much I love your new book. And so I'm always waiting for, but you forgot to add that. Yeah, but I mean, it was very nice, and I kind of didn't slow down as I was heading downhill towards the car. But I mean, that's kind of all I'm hearing now. Fun things are happening. Today is National Waffle Day. Who knew that there was a thing? But we have a yeast risen waffle recipe in there, and somebody posted a picture of it from the book before I even realized that today's the day I should be flogging that, and so I did too.
That recipe makes me want to buy a waffle iron. I've never seen a waffle whose texture looked so
It's
light. It just looks heavenly.
that's the name of
Oh
it.
yeah, it is heavenly.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I called it because my mom was coming to visit. She loves waffles, but she also likes angel biscuits, the real light
Right.
thing. So I thought, well, let's call these angel waffles. And then my editor said, well, how about if we call them heavenly waffles or something? So
Just like an editor.
yeah. But if you buy a waffle iron, please don't buy those little ones where the waffle's not very deep. But
Right.
get those kind of Belgian ones that are,
Yeah.
because it's all about the yeast rising. Those
Yeah.
things just take off.
The picture's gorgeous. All right, questions. Please come up to the microphone so that everyone can hear your question rather than just assuming that everyone can hear it. Anyone? Yes, someone.
Brian, I just want to congratulate you for the incredible amount of hard work you have done, and I've watched, of course, as things have unfolded. But I just want to tell everybody, it's not really a question, how incredibly crazy an idea to bake out of your house and then sell it the next day at a farmer's market. How incredible amount of work, and I'm a night owl, so I just wanted maybe to have you talk about the hours it took to sell to a farmer's market, to make, transport, and then be there with a smile on your face. It's beyond belief for me.
I don't know how much of that I want to tell because one of my editors from Smithsonian is sitting right there, and an editor of mine from the Washington Post is sitting right back there, and I always kind of left her like midday on Fridays to go out to the farmhouse, and then I baked overnight and sold it. It wasn't actually a farmer's market, but it was a little country store. And I loaded up this, God, it sounds like the Beverly Hillbillies, but I loaded up the truck and drove over yonder, as this guy pointed out, to this little market. And they opened at 10. I knew where the key was hidden. I would park and start bringing in cakes and pies and granola, and around 9 o'clock or so. Then the next week, or shortly weeks after, I pulled up, and there were already cars waiting. And these people, they didn't want to wait till the store opened at 10. They wanted to buy it right now from the truck because that stuff went fast. So it was kind of a crazy idea to be doing that now that I think about it. But it's just me not thinking about things and like, okay, I want to bake. I'm going to sell out the truck. I'm going to take it to the store. I'm going to cash in my savings and open up a bakery in an old gas station and, you know, and watch my investors flee as soon as the Great Recession hit. So I was kind of looking at everything short term, and that's probably what got me this far.
Something tells me that your editors wouldn't care about hearing about this because something tells me that you got all of your work done.
I did, didn't I? Maybe.
Yes, it's the trials you brought in.
Well, yeah. Well, that was a monthly schedule, but that was a weekly schedule. That was kind of rough going, but
Man. Yes, ma'am.
nah.
Hi.
Hello.
I was a little distracted in the beginning. I had to finish up an important message. I heard you mention something about living in the Monterey area.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I had the great fun of living in the Bay Area for not long enough, but long enough to run up and down the coast. Did you ever hear of a place called Duarte's in Pescadero?
I've heard of it. I don't even know if I've been there.
Oh, okay.
Or family did.
Yeah, I think they're famous not for bakery.
She knows
but
about it.
For cream of asparagus and cream of artichoke soup, written up in all the magazines.
That was a good place to grow up. I mean, with Castroville being the artichoke capital of the world. I mean, that was right next door to us. I mean, it really was like America's salad bowl.
Well, I have a question. I grew up watching all the cooking shows, Julia Child and everyone, and had a chance to meet Alice Walters when I lived in the Bay Area. So I tried to cook. I tried to make some herb Parmesan drop biscuits. They dropped. I'm sure I followed the recipe.
Yeah, you followed it too closely.
Yeah, I mean, followed the recipe, and so that was like the first. Any hints on, or should I just look in the book?
No, I'll tell you a little history. The first cookbook had our regular biscuits in there, buttermilk, flaky. We called them Rise and Shine biscuits. And then we went on book tours and demos, and I was artist in residence for a week in Bluffton at Palmetto Bluffs in South Carolina. And I showed people how to make the two things that scare them the most, pie crust and biscuits.
Yeah.
And so we followed the recipe, and it was great. But I learned during that book tour that I could even simplify that biscuit recipe. It doesn't have to chill for a couple hours. And I took some of the moisture out and added a little bit more flour, a little more sugar. And so there's a better version in the new book that's a lot easier. So start with that one. Jump over the first one and go to the second one. But Alice Waters, you met her back then. I met her right here when she was here with
met her here too.
her daughter doing some kind of Cafe Fanny book signing.
Oh, okay.
And but we had been to Cafe Fanny on Bastille Day way back, I don't know, late 80s or something. And she had this great chicken grilled sandwich on focaccia. The chicken breast was wrapped in prosciutto with sage leaves and then grilled and then cut up and put on with watercress and a garlic aioli. And then she served out on the street because it was so busy that she didn't even have the dining room open upstairs and we just sat outside. This watermelon punch. And I mean, that was from the 80s and I still hadn't forgotten it. And so that chicken sandwich with Alice Waters' full credit is in the new book.
Oh, okay. I'll look for it.
So, if that made you hungry, it's really great. And don't skimp on the garlic. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Well, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. So let me tell you what we got here for you. The very famous now Lexington bourbon cake with lots of ginger. There's another cake here that came too late for the cookbook, and I'll hear about that. And I already heard about that. I should have told you that. You know, people had this at the bakery. Is this in the second cookbook? No, it just came out at Easter, but it's a honey. I wanted, and what drove this was like the writer in me. I wanted the ultimate Southern sounding cake. So it's sweet tea and honeysuckle, and it took a little while to get the balance right, so it wasn't too perfumey or muddy. But it's what did I tell you? It's delicate and subtle.
Yep.
So don't look for. Maybe eat that before you eat the bourbon and ginger cake. And then from the new cookbook also are the bakeries that we serve at the brownies that we serve at the bakery every day, and then the castaway cookies with coconut and lime.
Are the which cake is on the left and which cake is on the right? Do you know? Can you tell? That's the bourbon cake.
Bourbon cake's slightly darker. Yeah. The honeysuckle is going to be a smaller thing, and the bourbon cake is made in this tidal wave kind of bunt pan, so it has these funny little points on it.
Okay.
So once we run out here, she's going to show you where this real stash is.
If I may,
Hi.
Before we send you both off with a big round of applause and send everyone on their way to cake, cookies, and brownies, just a few additional housekeeping reminders. Right after our round of applause, folks, please fold up the chairs. If you would, place those against the shelf to your left to keep our space clean and clear. We'll have a signing line that will begin right here where my person is standing. If you haven't already gotten a copy of the cookbook, we have more behind the registers. Grab that and line up orderly here, stretching back. Keep in mind, this is a carpeted space, so as you pick up your baked good and your fork, find your trash location behind you and at the front of the store, and be advised that we will be resetting the space as we close at 9 p.m. So we'll be moving some things around you. We just don't want to topple these baked goods as they're so delicious. Thank you all so much. Thanks again, Brian Noyes, Joe Yonan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.